Hey everyone, today I want to talk a little bit about high pass filtering in Flame. In 2025, if you are using it, we have the frequency node, which basically contains all the components to separate the high pass from the low pass and can greatly help you do some retouching, sharpening, or just general cleanup work. However, if you're using an earlier version of Flame or just want to kind of know how to deconstruct this technique and build it on your own so you have more control over it or just a better understanding of what's going on under the hood, then today's video is all about that. Because one, I'm not using Flame 2025 yet, and two, this is a technique that's been around for a long time. I don't know if it went out of fashion or we just got lazy or whatnot, but it seems to kind of have fallen by the wayside, and it is now kind of getting a second renaissance, so to speak. So a lot of times you'll see this used in retouch work and beauty work to kind of remove acne or smooth skin and whatnot, but today we're going to use it to kind of do some cleanup on this texture right here and get rid of this graffiti. Now, just to give you a quick context, the high pass is kind of defined as all of the detail in the clip. So when we separate this out and we'll go through it, you're going to see that this has we'll retain the lines of the brick, but and whatever texture comes with it, but not the color. The low pass is the color, and what this whole process does is basically lets us separate out the detail from the color, so we can kind of retouch each area independently and then combine them back together. It does take a specific series of events to make this work, but when you have the sequence down, it's real easy to kind of save and build from on every time that you need to do this. So let's go ahead and just get started. In this shot, we have a moving camera, so we're going to have to stabilize that out because otherwise none of our paint work in general will work out. And just to give you a little bit more insight, the whole reason for this is because if we'll stabilize it first, but if I do this paint work without separating it out, it's gonna be a lot more meticulous. So even though this takes more steps to set up initially, the workflow is so much faster and I can be a little bit sloppier because I'm just focusing on the details and then I'm just focusing on the color. And once I can treat those separately, it's a lot easier to kind of move through and do the kind of the retouches that I need. So we're just going to do perspective grid. I'm just worried about this graffiti area. Let's see. Something like this. I don't need to be too perfect, but I do want it to be pretty stable. And then let's also, I'm going to use a garbage mask to actually set the parameters for the track because I want to include a little bit more of this plane into the tracking, but don't necessarily want it as part of my solve. So we're going to double click the perspective grid, go to tracking. I'm going to include this G mask, and then when I hit F8 and snap, you'll see that the whole area is now being included in the perspective grid. So we'll just analyze this real quickly. Looks like that's holding up really well. And then I'm just gonna hide this garbage mask and let's feed it our source. So now we'll just connect the perspective grid. And in here, we just want to go to 2D and invert. So now we have our texture. So from here, if I wasn't doing this filtering at all, let's just show you a quick example of how precious I need to be, because there's also a lighting shift. So we do get some shadow that's coming in, and that does make the cloning a little bit harder. But if I was just trying to bully my way through this and just find an area to clone, you'll see pretty quickly, it's just that that I'm going to have some issues. It just doesn't look very good. So I'm gonna have to start expanding my clone. I'm gonna have to start getting creative. I'm gonna have to start softening, grab like bigger patches in different areas to kind of feather it in. And I'll get there, but I'm gonna create a little bit more work than I feel like I need to. And I'm gonna be constantly adding more strokes to kind of get the look that I want. Will I get there? Totally, but there's another way. So now here's how we're gonna create this high pass. It only requires a few nodes. We're gonna grab a blur node because we need to kind of set a variable of how much separation we want. Now, this can be adjustable. It can anywhere from like 3 to 10 pixels is probably where I'm going to be depending on what the goal is. If I'm focusing more on the color versus the texture, I might increase the blur a little bit. So I'll show you what both look like just so we can see. So there's a blur. I need to negate this blur, which, you know, don't worry about this intermediate step. It's gonna look wrong, but it's going to be corrected soon. And then I need to just average this over our original plate. So when I do this, this is your high pass. So this is exactly what it should look like. Now, I'm gonna set this as a context. This is the blur node that I was talking about. If I start going down, you'll start removing more color, and just showing more texture, which is great. So if I'm really just trying to deal with some of the details in the brickwork, then having a lower blur value is gonna help me. And I can obviously play with just the screen controls to kind of gamma up and change the exposure so I can see a little bit more if I need to, because it does get quite hard to see as you're staying with these values that are just above this threshold. However, in my situation, what I'm looking for is, I think the color work is going to be a little bit more difficult for me, and that's where I want to be a little bit more sloppy. So the more blur value I have, the easier it's going to be for me to kind of smear all this together. When it's at a really low value, I still have to be really precious about this texture. And so that's not really advantageous for me right now. So I know that at around 10, I've lost enough of the detail that I can kind of maybe smear and drag my way to the retouch. And as long as I am pretty good with my cloning right here, then I'm not too worried that we're gonna affect the texture too much, especially because I'm not trying to really remove anything. I'm really just trying to get the lines right, but not much else for this pass. So we are gonna paint directly on this high pass. I'm still going to do just a simple recursive clone. I want it for the whole sequence. And again, I don't need to be so worried about the color or anything else in this particular pass. I'm really just caring about the details. So I want to make sure I kind of want to line it up with another crosshair. And then from here, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to try to get the bricks close. I'm gonna go to the last frame, see how it holds up, and that's it. We're done with that part of the retouch. So we'll just kind of put that to the side. And then for the second part, we're attaching to the blur node. So we're coming straight off of our blur. Again, I could start to do the same thing I did originally when I was just trying to retouch on the source, but I don't need to. So that's the beauty of this. I can probably just drag and get enough of this color to kind of bleed in from the surrounding areas that I don't need to do much cloning at all. So I have drag on because I really just want this color information. That's all I need. So as long as I get rid of the white and I feel pretty good about the the smearing that we're doing, then that will give me everything I need to blend this together. Now, if I want to, though, I certainly can. Let's see, I'm cloning a little bit from down here, and maybe that'll help. But as you can see, it does not take doesn't take much thought. And that's kind of the beauty of this technique. Maybe just turn this down a little bit, because I'm not even too concerned about these lines, because the detail is going to come through when we combine these passes. So again, just kind of smearing it around with drag. And just go to the first frame. And let's see how this looks. Check the last frame. Let me just move this up a little bit more. For a demo, I'm not trying to make this perfect, but I think we get the idea. So now, let me just make sure we're on all the frames, which we're not. Go to the sequence. Okay, so now combining them is where it gets, where we want to make sure we're doing these steps properly. In Flame 2025, inside the comp node, there is now linear light, which is the filter that we need, but in 2024 and earlier, you have to use the Photoshop version. So you want to make sure the high pass is your front and your blurred low pass is your back. So when we go to the result view, so blend type is set to flame, but like I said, we need to use the Photoshop version because that's where linear light is inside of Flame 2024. So immediately you can see that what it does is it takes this high pass, takes the blurred low pass, and it combines it back together. So now if we set this as a context versus our original kind of poorly done retouch, you can see quite a difference. I see a little bit of area right here that I should tweak. I don't know what I did. Oh, I can see just doesn't look very pretty, so why don't we just retouch a little bit more. I'll just grab something right here. And again, that's how quickly you can just kind of move your way through it. So there you go. That part's done. Now we just need to reverse engineer our perspective grid. So I've duplicated that. I'm attaching this, and I could actually just grab the alphas from the retouch, and let's just add those together. So here, because we don't want to restore anything that we will filter. So now it's just a matter of inverting this. So let's turn our background on, hide the icons, and I'm just going to scan through it. And there we go. We have restored. I might generally just add a little bit to this. Just for a little bit of pad, but yeah, there you go. There you have it. I think it's a pretty simple concept once you have it. Just to kind of refresh everything, you want to first set up a blur node anywhere between 3 and 10 pixels is more than enough. Then you want to negate that, and then you want to average it over the original. So you have your negated blurred image over the original source image, and this will give you your high pass. You want to paint on the high pass just to, do whatever texture, detail work you need. In this case, it was the lines on the bricks. It could be removing artifacts. It could be removing moles, what have you. That's usually what happens in the high pass. And then in your low pass, which feeds off of the original blur, is where you're going to do your color work. And this is without the detail, and you can try to be as sloppy as what's allowed, just so that you can kind of get the color information. So once you have those two, you're going to combine them back using a Photoshop linear light, and now you're back to the original with your retouches. And then from there, I just invert the tracking that I did so I can restabilize, and now you have your retouch done in a fraction of the time and with a little bit better results. Now in the Flame 2025 version, there is a third pass that does come into play that they've added. So there's a 2-pass, which is what we see here, which you have the high pass and the low pass. There's another one that has an added blur for a little bit more separation. I haven't played with it yet, so I can't speak to it, but that might be the only difference in the node versus what you see here in this kind of workflow. In the next video, we're probably going to do a retouching example with some skin, just to kind of get that out of the way, and some sharpening, because you can also use this to kind of sharpen your image. And while it will mimic some of the Matchbox nodes, it's nice to kind of, again, engineer the steps if you have the time or luxury. Thanks, everyone, and hit me up if you have any questions. Talk to you soon. Bye.